Hello, I'm Tom and this is Finn, and we're here to read chapter 15 of D-Day Dog, aren't we, Finn? And Finn can't wait for this episode because he's in it. Jack sat, can you see Finn? Jack sat in the passenger seat as his mum drove him the short distance to school. The streets were dark and unfamiliar at midnight. Few cars, few pedestrians, not even dog walkers. It was so late. Jack held Finn close to his chest. His dog was chewing the sleeves of Jack's blue Normandy tour hoodie. The last thing in the world Jack wanted to do was leave Finn, but he made a deal with his dad. He was going to France. After Jack's announcement a week earlier that he wasn't going on the residential trip, his mum had been called into school, but even she couldn't persuade him to change his mind. Then Dad had come back home to see Jack. Dad had said he needed time to think about whether he would go to Afghanistan, and part of that thinking would involve talking with Mum without having to worry about Jack. I lost my place now. They needed to find a way forward, so they asked Jack to go on the trip while they took some time to figure things out. Jack agreed. What else could he do? He wondered about asking, and what if you can't figure things out? But he didn't. Back in school, he'd also reached a deal with Mr. Salah. Jack would be given his cross, but he didn't have to plant it in Ronville Cemetery if he didn't want to. He wouldn't be forced to visit any of the museums or cemeteries either if he didn't want to go. Stop it, you've got to stay. Look, he doesn't want to stay, so I've got to let him go. I'm just going to read it to you, right? I'll read that last paragraph again. Jack would also be given his cross, but he did not have to plant it in Ronville Cemetery if he didn't want to. He wouldn't be forced to visit any of the museums or cemeteries either if he didn't want to go. He could stay on the bus with the coach driver instead. Finn, you coming back? No, okay. They were closer to school now. Jack could see light coming from behind the high hedges that surrounded the school playing fields. It looked like as if a spaceship had landed on the pitches, but Jack knew it was just cars. In the car park, headlights caught the faces of some of his classmates, some excited and animated, others not. Jack spotted Kofi with Danny, then Grace and Asma and Ella and Cassandra. When Jack saw Lucas standing with his mum and Mrs. Khan, gosh, this is a long chapter, right, and Mrs. Khan, but scanning the car park, his face was tense. Jack rolled the window down and called out to his friend. He saw the tension fade and a wide grin appear on Lucas's face. The car parked up, but Jack didn't move. He could sense that Finn was staring at him in the darkness, but he couldn't bring himself to return the gaze. Finn knew that Jack was going away. He had sat in the corner of the room as Mum had packed Jack's stuff. Does Mr. Salah know about Dad and all the stuff about Afghanistan? Jack asked his mum now. Yes, Mum replied. He won't mention it, but he's aware you need looking out for. Is that okay? Jack nodded. He's pleased you're coming, Mum went on. He thinks you're brave. Jack buried his face in Finn's fur and closed his eyes. Outside, Jack and Finn followed Mum to the wheeled his suitcase to the back of the bus. Jack held Finn's lead tight. The dog was nervy. Jack wished he'd left Finn in the car, but it was too late to change his mind now. They arrived alongside the coach. A short, heavy-set man with two arms full of tattoos and a cigarette in his mouth was loading bags into the large hole between the wheels. Jack assumed he was the driver. Jack stood with Mum and Finn, watching his classmates, all of them in their blue tour hoodies, waiting for their turn to hand over their bags. You want that on the bus? The driver asked gruffly. Or are you going to stand there all night? Thank you, Mum said, pushing Jack's suitcase towards the driver. Jack decided he didn't like the man. They moved away from the bus to where Mrs. Mace, the head teacher, was standing with a box of plastic folders. Evening, Mrs. Ashville, she said to Jack's mum. Are you all set for Normandy, Jack? Jack wanted to say no, but he nodded. He felt Finn's nose on his hand. He knelt and put his dog in a headlock, and they wrestled for a few seconds. Is Finn coming with us? Mrs. Mace asked. Can he? Jack asked. his heart skipping a beat before he quickly realised his teacher was joking. For a few seconds, neither Mrs. Mason nor Mum said anything. Jack knew they were doing that thing where two adults look at each other and silently pass a message between them. Here, Mrs. Mace handed Jack a plastic wallet. Your file. There's information about the D-Day trip, a diary for you to fill in each night while we're away, and your cross. 3 of Jack's classmates came past, each carrying a pillow and a cuddly toy. At first Jack wanted to laugh. Cuddly toy! Ha! How soft were they? Then he saw one of the cuddly toys was a dog, and he felt his throat tighten and the space between his eyes go all hot. This way, please, Jack heard 6B's class teacher, Mr. Thompson, say. First class and business travellers upstairs, please. Jack jumped as he heard some of the adults laugh at Mr. Thompson's joke, and he looked round quickly. That was when his cross dropped out of his plastic folder. Finn saw it fall, but the dog's attention was too fixed on Jack to want to pick it up. I'll look after it. I'll look after Finn, Mum was saying. You know I will. I'll send you photos of him every day. You need to be strong, Jack. Just say goodbye to him now. He'll be fine. You know you will be too. I know you. Jack's mum's words cut through his feelings. She was right, and anyway, he had no choice. Everyone was watching him. Jack squatted. Finn, look at me. Finn stared deep into Jack's eyes. I'll be back just in a few days, Jack said. Then I'll be back. Understand? Finn's eyes stayed fixed on Jack's. He's asking me why I'm going, Jack thought. Jack stared back into his dog's eyes and tried to reassure him, thinking about all the things they'd do when he got home, thinking about Glenn and Emile Courtiel and how they could communicate like this, reading each other's minds, dog and boy, speaking without words. I'm coming back, Jack said without speaking. Jack felt pretty sure Finn would get the message. He breathed in deeply, grabbed Finn's collar and growled into his dog's furry neck. Then he stood up and felt his mum kiss his head. Jack was sure some of the others were watching, wondering whether he was about to back out. Go, she said. So Jack went. Up the steps to the top deck, not looking back, the first time away from home, away from Finn and his mum and his dad. Upstairs there were 66 seats in twos running the length of the bus, with an aisle in between. Strip lights along the ceiling illuminated his classmates' grinning faces. Because it was dark, the windows of the bus acted like mirrors, making it look like there were 100 children, not 60. Bags of sweets were being handed round. Jack, with me! Lucas had saved a place for him. Jack sat next to his friend. Look, Lucas said, I can see your mum and Finn, but your dad's not there. Jack stared down and saw his mum among the other parents waving, Finn looking anxious, like he was desperate to find Jack. Then he started to howl his don't leave me howl, even though he knew Finn would be fine with Mum at home. Jack still felt bad, really bad. Jack noticed the driver stoop to pick something up off the floor by the coach before he climbed into the driver's seat. He'd probably dropped his cigarettes. The engine was on now, the bus quivering like Finn at the door before a walk. When the bus moved out of the school car park onto the main road, Jack craned his neck to get a last glimpse, past Lucas, of Finn. When all he could see was darkness, he sat back and wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Cassandra was sitting across the aisle. She was the only one who noticed Jack was upset. Are you okay? She asked in a quiet voice. Jack shrugged. Just about. He tried to smile. He is a nice dog. What is his name? Finn, Jack said. Finn, I like that. I think your dog was looking for you. Jack felt his eyes well up with hot tears. He nodded, failed to smile for a second time, and looked out of the window. That's the end of chapter 15. In chapter 16, they're on the way to Portsmouth, the wonderful city of Portsmouth, and then to get the ferry across to France. And I hope you can join us on that journey. Thank you for listening. Oh, and just for your information, Finn is wanting to get out of the door. In fact, he's looking under the door. You can probably see because the cat's on the other side, probably taunting him. Anyway, thank you.